this practical compliance guide can very much be a massive risk for your accounting firm. But at the same time, it represents a huge opportunity to drive growth in advisory services and also to engage with clients on a deeper level. If you're an accounting practitioner, because you would, almost certainly fall within the practical compliance guide. What I would suggest is to speak to your PI insurer or your PI insurance broker and speak to them about your tax audit insurance sublimit as part of your policy. I know personally, I'm an accounting practitioner. I've got about 200 grand worth of cover in terms of tax audit insurance. So just to make sure that I'm covered, if I get looked at, I can make a claim on my insurance and they can take care of it in terms of this particular allocation of profits issue. Obviously, you should also actually run diagnostics on your firm to make sure that you're not a very high risk practice, but by all means, make sure that you're squared away first, then have a look at your clients. It very much is a opportunity to bring on board salary partners in various professions such as law, accounting, architects, engineers. They're often at the start of their careers. They're often going to need an accountant to guide them through, to set up their practice trust, to advise them on what the best way forward is for them across their lifetime. In terms of your own client base as well, there's 4 real main ways that I think you can sort of utilize this as a call to action, this practical compliance guide. The first is evaluating whether or not a subset of your clients falls into these rules or not, then to run risk mitigation across your base, update your engagement letters, and also have communications with your clients that indicate whether or not they would like the firm to consider the practical compliance guide as part of their compliance. So I think those two are kind of your very, very basic sort of side of things in terms of, hey, let's look at this. Let's make sure we know who this applies to and whether or not we need to talk to them. Then the last two are really basic advisory services and advanced advisory services. What do I mean by that? Basic advisory is basically tax planning, where you have very conservative clients. They may want to swing between the flags. They may want to make sure that they comply with the practical compliance guide and make sure that the allocation of any ATO resources from an audit perspective don't touch their clients. That's perfectly understandable. I think the only cautionary thing I'd say to you, if that's your approach in terms of tax planning, would be to outline what the tax cost of swinging between the flags actually is. And we'll go through examples later to actually sort of expand upon that. Lastly, a reasonable position paper or advanced advisory, where you have clients that are a little bit more sophisticated, understand that they'll be in the crosshairs. And I think largely a lot of professions such as law, accounting, engineering, those particular clients, you may actually put in place a piece of advice to address the exposure of Part 4A or that particular client in anticipation of an audit. And I think it's really important to document everything that you do so that, when the ATO does knock on the door, often the best defense in an audit is offense. Hey, here's my reasonable position paper, all of my documentation that says I've already thought about this issue and addressed it with the client. It's not a foolproof plan. It never kind of means that you will not get audited at all, but it does sort of say to the auditor, hey, this practitioner has thought about this. They've actually put in place documents to establish that they don't have an exposure. Let's assess those documents. If you've got a number of individual practitioners that you look after, for example, a couple of lawyers that are at that, director level, sort of salary partner moving into equity partner, this gives you the opportunity to pitch for the law firm, go for the actual business itself, because you're looking at one of the systemic issues that is probably best addressed at a firm level rather than at a partner level, even though, the exposure is applied to the, applied at the partner level. It's just an opportunity to have those discussions and to shoot for the stars. So look, I think that's why we should care about this. And I think, that's a broad overview of the opportunities and risks associated with this practical compliance guide. What is a practical compliance guide? It's an expression of the Commissioner's allocation of their compliance resources to an area of tax law. So what are some of the differences between a public ruling and a practical compliance guide? A public tax ruling gives the Commissioner the ability to propose a determination, an interpretation of a tax law, whether that's a procedural or substantive tax law, to say, this is how I think this law applies. A practical compliance guide is really silent on how that law applies. It instead says, this is what the ATO policy will be in terms of the allocation of our resources to check that you're doing the right thing.